come. I don't know how, am I speaking too loud? Sounds like I sound like a lot. Okay, I use my small voice. Welcome to PicoCAD, a talk about creativity within restrictions. Maybe not everybody knows what PicoCAD is, so let's start with that. It's a tiny modeler for very tiny models. Some people have described it as a 3D pixel art tool. The main intention is that it's very limited, and that's been the kind of the idea from the beginning, that it's not supposed to do all these fancy things. It's just going to do very few things. Here's a primary use case where you use boxes to put them together into more interesting shapes. A little truck in this case, and then you go into the other mode, and you maybe you're all 3D modelers. Let's make a test here. How many can 3D model, basic 3D modeling? UV unwrapping, not so many. What I'm trying to do here is make everything simple, right? Easy tools, not so many options. So you build your model and then you put some pixel art textures. A bit about myself before we go into that. My name is Johan. I come from Sweden. It's a long far away. It's dark and cold, and we sit in front of our computers all the time. I've been a serial game developer since mid-90s. Indie for life, I guess, but with a few distractions along the way. When I'm not hunched in front of my computer, I try to enjoy some Swedish countryside, which you should all come and visit, because when the sun is up, it's actually quite nice. But let's go back before we touch into PicoCAD, how I actually arrived into making such a stupid project. This is sometime in the mid-90s, maybe I'm 15 or something. I made my first computer game that I actually showed to someone else. It was actually movable from my home computer into another computer. Try to remember the scale of things, and we'll come back to that later. Quickly thereafter, I moved on to slightly bigger games, made lots of platform games, even bigger games. This is Super VGA, which is like many pixels on the screen, right? I did some advertising games, and it feels like every step of my career I kind of made bigger and bigger things, right? We made Facebook games and tried to optimize all that stuff. Went into iPhones when that was the big thing, more 3D, more power, etc. And eventually I ended up in AAA, making lots of big budget games, loads of polygons, loads of technical stuff. And during this process I kind of felt, am I even making games anymore, or am I just optimizing technical pipelines? And also during this time I found something called Pico 8, which came very conveniently into my life. Who's heard of Pico 8 in here? Ooh, lots for you, those of you who haven't heard of it. I'll do a brief introduction later. But let's just say it's like a small computer that doesn't exist, and we can talk more about that later. But suddenly, when I found this Pico 8 and I realized this is much more fun than cramming millions of polygons, all my games started to look like this again. And compared to that first screenshot I showed, it's actually the same size of that first rectangle. And I found that with Pico 8 I could just do games instead of thinking about how to make localization for right to left languages, or how to optimize the last polygons out of a car. So suddenly I was hyper-focused on making super tiny, small little games. And this is kind of where I started thinking about PicoCAD, which this talk is actually about. So I'll talk a bit about how it came to be, how the constraints of Pico 8 actually shaped both PicoCAD, and also how it shaped what people used PicoCAD for. Some unexpected and fun outcomes, and hopefully some other interesting bits and bobs. So first, Pico 8 for the three of you in the audience who don't know what it is. Joseph White, Zepp, who came up with the whole idea, he says it's a fantasy console for making, sharing, and playing tiny games and computer programs. I think it's best to describe it as a piece of hardware that doesn't exist and somebody made an emulator for it. When you start up Pico 8, you have all these nice tools lots of information here, but there's a code editor, there's a graphics editor, there's a tile map editor, and there's a sound editor, and you can do lots of things with it. But the problem with the PicoCAD, not the problem, I should say, it's the core strength of the program is that it has a lot of restrictions. You restrict it to 128 times 128 in terms of graphics or resolution. You have your 16 colors, you can't change them. There's a limited amount of graphics you can actually use, there's a limited amount of tile map, and as soon as you try to do something bigger, there's always something that says, now here's a set limit you can't actually do anymore. So the upside is that it's slightly stronger than a Super Nintendo, I guess. So you can actually do some fun stuff with the limited resolution and a lot of horsepower. You can actually cram out more than people think out of it. The biggest restriction is that it uses something they call tokens, which is basically a word when you're programming. So if you want to see, say, A plus B equals 2, that's 5 words right there, and you only have 8,000 of those. So very quickly, when you try to do complex things, you run out of space, basically. So extremely limited, but also very powerful once you start to learn these limits. Yeah. So let's say Unreal is the evil Emperor Palpatine. Then you have Yoda on the other hand, that it doesn't really matter. All this power, right? Strong but small. So lots of restrictions, limitations, but on the other hand, when it comes to design, all your technical decisions have already been taken for you. You don't need to decide whether to have 30 or 60 FPS. You don't need to decide which colors you're going to have, how big of a screen is it going to be. Everything is already set. So you can actually focus on the fun stuff, right? Making games. And this all creates a very cozy design space where you don't have to think about the boring things. You can just make games. There's a great community online. Lots of people who are extremely talented, much more talented than myself, who keep pushing the envelope every week, every month, every update to find new fun things to do with this. Worth checking out if you haven't. So that's kind of environment I'm in. I found PicoCAD. It's a great piece of software. I'm making all these small games. And suddenly I got fired, as it happens. And I had lots of time over, still on this little severance package. And at the same time, I started to think about PicoCAD, kind of slightly bored about these 2D games, just making platform games. Everything was very flat. So can you actually do 3D with PicoCAD? There are a few demos that comes with the software, but it's mostly dots moving around. How much can you push, and what will it actually look like? And suddenly, what happens in the community is that people kind of move from flavor of the month. 1 month, everybody makes audio experiments. Another month, everybody does 3D experiments. And this happened to coincide with one of those 3D experiments. So people were kind of trying out stuff, and I was happy to jump on. So this, I think, is the first thing I did. Enjoy some crunchy pixels. The 3D math in PicoCAD is the easiest bit, actually. Once that is in place, the rest followed quite naturally. As you see, quite quickly I had what's called face culling. If it's on the wrong side, you don't need to render it, etc. Here's me trying out some textures. Doesn't work very well. If you work a lot of textures, you know that there's perspective correctiveness, something like that, where you kind of see a texture at an angle. It should become smaller, not just the face, but also the texture. PicoCAD can't do that, so I'm using something called affine transformation, which people might remember from the PlayStation 1 area, which is why you kind of see a bit of tearing from the yellow side to the blue side. And this was surprisingly easy to get going. And it turned out quite quickly that the best use case I had at the moment was making boxy cars. It was quick to draw, and they kind of look cute when they move around. And the idea was kind of, can I put this into some sort of actual immersive experience? I had some idea about maybe there's a police chase, something. One huge problem when trying all these 3D things was that I could display these things, but I couldn't really make them in a proper way. I sat with graph paper and drawing everything by hand, and as soon as I was doing UV coordinates, and as soon as I needed to change anything, it just had to rewrite everything from the beginning. It was an extremely tedious process that didn't really work. This is this smallest red car, it creates this list, right? And go in and hand edit that when you want to move the roof slightly higher, it just doesn't work, right? So then I thought, how do actually people do this? I've never 3D modeled before I made this program. Maybe once or twice, but it definitely wasn't anything I was good at. But I did study, I'm old, so back then when I was in high school, I don't know what it's called, we didn't have computers. So we did these drawings instead, right? Technical something, and so maybe this is a thing, right? You have these various things, you can have this object, you can see it from different views, and there's a 3D view. Okay, I can make this work maybe. How would it look in Pico 8? A bit more pixelated. But this was quite quickly, I came to this and after a while, and I've seen that this is actually how you do things. Lots of editors use this model, right? But quite quickly, the fundamentals of PicoCAD fell into place. We'd be marking vertices in one viewport and then moving them around to see them. It turned out it was quite nice feel to work here and kind of see, okay, I change a little bit here, I change a little bit there, and everything kind of grows from there. But this talk is about how all these constraints from Pico 8 actually shaped it. And there were a number of challenges along the way. One is obviously the super tiny resolution. And as I've been made to understand, you want to be able to kind of reach everything at once. If you look at Blender or something, there's going to be a myriad of buttons and sliders and things all over the place. That doesn't fit right on Pico 8's tiny screen. So the solution was to do context-aware menus. You actually don't ever see all the things that PicoCAD can do, but there's lots of shortcuts and menus. So the software comes when you start it up or when you look at the About screen. I think it says read the manual because that's where all the information is. But this had a positive effect as well, that there's no information overload. You can start up PicoCAD and still feel that, okay, I can work in this, right? I can understand how to use this over time. And actually, once you start using PicoCAD, the same way you kind of use PicoCAD and slowly uncover more and more features, PicoCAD works a bit the same way. Yeah, and I find it quite relaxing to use. You know the outcome is going to be so anyway, so it's kind of okay to just play around with it. Yeah, here would be the example, right? Lots of stuff and not so much stuff. Same result, different program. Another challenge was feature complexity. Obviously, people often say when they see PicoCAD, you can do that in Blender. And yes, you can do everything in Blender, but not everybody can use Blender. But you still want to do a lot of different things, right? And there's limited performance. We have this 8 megahertz CPU to work with. The code space is quickly running out, and the resolution is also very low. So what I ended up with was to find kind of what are all the things I want to be able to do, and can I locate what are the atomic actually verbs, if you want to say that actually needs to be done. And can then use it, then chain those together into more complex things. So maybe if you use a professional piece of software, you would use a specific tool, but here you kind of need to invent that tool yourself, right, by doing a few number of things. This also worked really well. It became a super low threshold for people to jump into the software. You see very quickly what it can do and what it can't do. And as you kind of keep learning it, you can start to create these chains of your own to do more complex scenarios. No, sorry. Advanced users can still do anything with big caveat on anything, but within reasonable. I think these are the only two menus that actually exist in PicoCAD that actually have some relevance. You can add these different volumes. And then you can select colors, and you can, I think the main use case is you create something and then you start extruding various shapes to get out it. And you can rotate it. I don't know if people do that, but basically you pick a shape and then you start modifying that until it looks like what you want it to look. A big problem with files is that you want to have them. Pico 8 doesn't have any sense of file input or output. It's a very sandboxed area. And the user, they do want to save their work, right? And they want to load their work. Doesn't exist on Pico 8. How can that be solved? There's a serial interface. For those of you who are more into the Pico 8 scene, you can add hardware to it, and then you can put on all sorts of weird things onto it. And there's a serial bus that you can then connect into the software. And you can connect anything like bus timetables or a synth or a light machine or something. But it also turned out that if you dropped a file on your application, then that file was loaded through this serial bus, right? So then it's almost like dropping a physical file and you actually get it into the program. The same way, it has a debug function, so you can actually pipe debug information to a file. So the save file in Pico 8, it's actually the debug output from Pico 8. Don't tell anyone, but that's how it works. So lots of tricks to kind of tweak the engine to actually be usable. The good side of this is that this text format was super valuable for lots of people who wanted to do more with Pico 8, but they found it a bit limited, they wanted to do more. But everything was open. The text file is actually a Lua table. That's the save format, so you can just push it straight into any other application, which worked really nice. Number 3, people want to do nice things, I understand that. And want to really, this vertex should go here. I can't do that on Pico 8 because we're stuck with 16-bit fixed point numbers. That means as you go very low or as you go very high, you can't really represent all numbers in the software or even the imagined hardware. And also you can't go more than 32K in either direction. So lots of restrictions, very technical. And the screen is obviously very low resolution. So what I did was say, okay, the default movement of anything is a quarter of a unit, I guess. And if you actually want to do a disable snapping, then you have to go press a button or something. And that made it super easy to make, I mean, as you first move around in Pico 8, move your mesh or something, it looks super restricted, right? Because, I can't really put it where I want. But as soon as you kind of adopt to that, then it's super easy to start snapping things together and you can build some really fun-looking stuff. And it's really easy to just get it to look right? You don't need to sit there and fiddle on the last pixel. Let you look at the Nintendo DS for a while. Very interesting. A lot of the models people build are old hardware and Nintendo stuff. It's very close to heart, I guess. Last one was, how do you actually make this look good? It would be nice if there was actually some sort of shading. How do we achieve shading in a software that only have 16 wildly different colors? So what I did was set up, Pico 8 has this weird thing, since it can't do colors, that you can tell if you want to flood fill an area, for instance, or draw a rectangle, you can say, do it with this pattern, and it creates a little bit pattern on it. So that could be used then to do these color ramps. So instead of having lots of blue shades or lots of red shades, I picked up colors that were fairly close and made a crosshatch out of those. I think you can see it easily in the middle of the donut, how it kind of fades from primary color into a secondary color via this dithered pattern. A bit of an afterthought. At the first when I did this, it wasn't even, I mean, it was possible, but Zepp, who was designing Pico 8 at the same time, actually added features to Pico 8 so I could achieve this look while I was developing, because it was only available for primitive drawing operations, but he also made it available for sprite drawing, which is happening here. So it's really nice to have that kind of back and forth with the developer of the platform. bit tedious to do, but it created this really unique aesthetic for the program, and when people kind of see these things online, they can quite quickly recognize it, that it was a PicoCAD model, and you can go Google it, and people have PicoCAD shaders for Blender and whatever just to achieve this look, which is nice. So that's kind of the development and the choices leading up to that. What happened then? I didn't pay anybody through marketing. I was still on my severance. I didn't really care about money. Everything was good. I posted during development, and it was very clear that it resonated with people, and people had a lot of fun watching GIFs, if nothing else. The whole thing felt accessible and playful and not boring. My words. I'm not going to badmouth any other tools, of course, but I think PicoCAD extends a bit of fun in there. And if nothing else, it's very different from what most people are used to. And I was a bit lucky that people were very interested, and I managed to create a small group of beta testers who were really good artists, and they started putting up stuff on their social media, and they had big followings, and it kind of snowballed from there. Again, people like game culture, so that's what they were building. Lots of throwbacks to old consoles and things like that. So slowly and steadily, people started to know what it was. Then I launched. Again, I was on my severance. I thought, who's going to care about this little software? I'm mostly going to use it for myself. You know, that car game that never happened. I kind of got tangled into making the tool, so that never became a thing. So I said, name your own price. If you think it's worth any to you, then pay for it. Launched on Itch, that's quite a while ago, 2021. And the use case, what you could do with the software from the beginning was basically build something, post it on social media, and I had a watermark burned into every GIF, so it says #PicoCAD in the middle. So as soon as somebody posted something, people start asking, what's that, right? So it snowballed quite a lot. Oh, sorry. People made art. Was it because of the restrictions or despite? I don't know, but it actually seemed to work. The kind of simplicity of the software really invited people to use it. And something that surprised me a lot, but there seems to be a lot of pixel artists who didn't really have started with 3D, who thought this was a really good tool. Kind of start trying out 3D and see how it works. So here's some nice things that people built. A duck. A more, looks like Swedish summer, midsummer maybe. And it's been really nice seeing people recreating. I'm not an art person, but this is supposedly a real piece of art that somebody recreated in PicoCAD. Nice Star Wars motive. So I mean, it's pretty long step from those little cars I made in the beginning, and it's going to talk a bit later how these more complex scenes are made. One quirk of PicoCAD is that it can't do depth buffering properly, so it can only sort in terms of faces. You can see this there's a bit of flickering in the middle one. So there's a technique you have to learn. How do we limit intersecting faces when you use PicoCAD to get professional, so to speak. Little spaceship man, nice. Just go onto Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever and search for #PicoCAD, and you'll have pages and pages of stuff that people made. Amazing. Few numbers. Started at pay what you want. That worked quite well for a while, and then people started to not pay for it. And then I switched to paid, and then launched on Steam in late 24. 100,000 downloads, about 20,000 sales. I don't know if it's a lot or little, but it does pay the most of my income at the moment. So very happy with this, obviously. And it seems to keep on living. People seem to find this little software again and again and again. And some extra fun things, like I said, this Star Wars scene from Hoth, for instance. How do you manage all those objects in PicoCAD? So since the file format was open, people started making tools for it, right? So here's a toolkit where you can take multiple PicoCAD objects and push them into the same scene. Or you can take a very complex model and have it UV unwrapped for you and things like that. So those who make the most advanced models, I wouldn't say they're cheating, but they're using some steroids to get there. Other tools were how do we take other formats into PicoCAD, for instance, the OBJ or other things people made. Since they couldn't get the PicoCAD shading style into their own programs, they tried to get stuff into PicoCAD, right, and render that. And it's interesting that PicoCAD has a built-in limit because of memory restrictions. You can't build your models to a certain size, right, then it's capped. But for some reason, it can still load models that are bigger. So people kind of put all the stuff in together. You can't edit them, but you can still use PicoCAD to render them. Somebody made a tool so you can draw directly onto your models, right, if you don't want to do that in a separate art package. And people who didn't like or they weren't satisfied with the original volumes that are in PicoCAD, and you can then obviously download more from some tool people did. So really happy to see that it's just getting bigger than I could have anticipated. People are using it for making paper models. There's at least one commercial game using PicoCAD for in-game objects, maybe more in the future. And it's also been seen in music videos where people have made lots of stuff in PicoCAD and then put music to that, or the other way around. So it's been really nice seeing people of the PicoCAD community starting out with whatever they start out with, and then be contacted by other people and want them to make low poly model for them. It's been amazing to see that journey for those people. Yeah. What's in the future? One big problem with PicoCAD is that it's built on Pico 8, which kind of is why PicoCAD exists, but it's also a problem because I can't really expand on it, right? Once you start compacting your program to actually fit within Pico 8's restrictions, there's no room anymore, right? It's like you're just stuck, so I can't even bug fix it. So that's always been a bit nagging for me to say, okay, it would be good to have these few things in there, but it just isn't possible. So therefore, ta-da, PicoCAD 2. Hopefully be basically the same as PicoCAD 1, but a bit more quality of life, a few more tools, all the learnings that all the community has had over these years. How do I push that into another piece of software? But still keeping it small, still simple, and still constrained. So I need to kind of take my own learnings that I've been speaking about today and use them myself. But I have some key takeaways if you want to work with restrictions. I think the main thing that stands out for me while I've been doing PicoCAD is that limitations helped me very much to find a style for PicoCAD and a personality, and people can kind of, it becomes a very unique artifact, I think. That really helped PicoCAD stand out from the crowd. When I was prototyping PicoCAD 2, I tried to use not use this dithered shading, but instead use just like usual boring video game shading, and that didn't look so good. So very happy that that wasn't possible in PicoCAD, right? So I can really find this identity for the software. The simplicity that comes with PicoCAD being a tool is it's very easy to approach, right? I've seen kids use it, grown-ups. I think if you worked a lot with 3D modeling, you probably don't understand it at all because you already have your ways of working with it. But coming into 3D modeling, as myself, I kind of learned 3D modeling as I did the software. It's very easy to get in when there's just not so many things you can do with it. And in this case, it really found a gap with pixel artists, for instance, who didn't have the experience in 3D to jump into Blender, but they could still realize their ideas. obvious one, but creativity thrives within constraints. I think it's been, at least for me, super obvious when using PicoCAD. I couldn't have made it in any other program if I hadn't been that boxed in, right? Everything else would have just skyrocketed feature creep in every single direction. And I think both Pico 8, when I made PicoCAD, constantly have to ask myself, what can I do with this? There's no room to wish for things you don't have, right? And I think people who use PicoCAD, they're kind of stuck in the same position. This is a very limited program. What can I do with this? And obviously, you can do a lot as long as you learn it properly. Yeah. Thanks for listening. That's the start and end of PicoCAD. Happy to take some questions. I'm on all the networks. Yes.
¿Alguna pregunta? Any questions?
Hi, thank you for the talk, it was good. Regarding PicoCAD 2, how are you going to stop yourself from bloating it from, you like the limits, but how do you stop?
It's a good question. So I'm not using Pico 8 for PicoCAD 2. I've moved on to something called Love 2D. And the first prototype I did of it was just that. It was bloated. It did everything. It imported OBGs. It had all the colors, lots of textures and everything. And I worked on that for a while and realized I'm never going to finish this piece of software. So I had to go back to the drawing board and find my own design pillars, basically. I said, okay, this is, or even further away and think of what made PicoCAD so good, right? Okay, it is limited. It can't do all these things. So my first idea was, the first thing I did was just, can I recreate PicoCAD 1 on another platform, right? And make sure that that worked as it should be. So as a new user coming into PicoCAD 2, okay, it looks like PicoCAD 1, right? All the things are the same. And then slowly, very slowly, think, let's do one feature at a time or one quality of life item at a time, so I don't just run away, right? Because it's so easy to end up there, right? And I pride myself on being able to finish and ship software, but it's still very difficult, right? But finding those design pillars and starting over and say, okay, let's just do the same thing, right? That helped a lot.
Hi, so before seeing this talk, I was convinced that you were maybe like using one of the tricks, because I know people do things like do like multi-card in Pico 8, or they put in like more tokens than the limit, but they still somehow compile it and run it anyways. I don't know, there are like Pico 8 games on Steam that they go over the 8,000 token limits. And given what I've seen of PicoCAD, I was sure like he must be like using some of those tricks, but I take it that you're not. And you didn't think of like expanding like in one of those ways?
I think so. One thing you can do with Pico 8, you have this, it's kind of cart based. So when you do a game, you're stuck to this 32 kilobytes. And if you want to do another game, you have to do it in a different cart. And then there's tricks. So you can do multi-cart. You can kind of load one cart for another cart and then chain games to some extent. But there's an artificial loading time of about, 1 to 2 seconds if you want to switch carts. And I don't like that. It feels bad. It doesn't feel pure Pico 8, right? So to answer your question, it's vanilla Pico 8, so to speak. I even made it in the text editor. I didn't use an external editor. Because I think also with Pico 8 and PicoCAD, all the assets for PicoCAD 2, for instance, are made in PicoCAD 2. Even the icons and the logos and things like that. It's a bit like dog fooding and staying in the software you're actually working in, at least for me, that helps a lot. And also if I open the door to multi-cart, then I know I'm going to go on a technological feature creep spree, because then everything is possible, right? And didn't want to do that. And it would be weird if you, okay, now I'm going to UV map and you can have to wait for 2 seconds. I know that's not a lot, but for me that's ages, right? And it would slow down testing a lot. And I think that iteration speed is something that makes Pico 8 really stand out as well.
That just makes it like a lot more impressive, to be honest. Like, well, thank you for the talk.
Yeah.
¿Alguna otra?
Hey, first of all, I want to say that I'm a fan of you since Icy Climbers. That made my childhood. Well, now that you're like making PicoCAD 2 and you are unbound from the Pico 8 limitations, and most of the limitations, I understand that you set them on yourself and also like the software that you're using now. But like, how are you gonna hold yourself accountable to like not upgrade like something like that would like defeat the purpose of like having limited? Like, how do you know where the limit of like this is the level of shitty I need for the platform?
I think it's a good question. I think it's difficult for any type of passion project you have to kind of rein in yourself and feel like, okay, this is enough. And going back to the design pillars, I think it has to be easy for new users. And my other superpower is that I get bored quite quickly of the things I make. So if I want to finish this, there's a certain time limit to my energy, right? And I think I'm quite close to it for now. So, but again, deciding what is the program going to be, and it's so easy to kind of start working on things that nobody's going to care about, right? I think where I am now in the development process, my testers, they are quite used to the software, so they are asking for more and more complex things. And I kind of need to say no to those people and take in some other people who are beginners with the software and see what are their challenges instead. Because I don't want it to be a deep and rich project. I want it to be very shallow, but with some emergent capabilities to do more complex things. So it's constant balance. So I just need to check with myself all the time and prioritize my lists.
Thank you.
Si no hay otra pregunta, pues vamos a darle un fuerte aplauso. Ahí tiene otra, vale. No pasa nada.
And this is kind of also asking you guys, if we have time, can you show PicoCAD 2?
A world premiere. I don't know if I have this. This is my development computer. Yes is the answer. I don't write PicoCAD 2 in Pico 8, so maybe you can even read it. No. Every software needs a nice intro. So it looks exactly the same. I've gone from 128 in terms of size to 192, which is, it feels twice as much. It's not really, but almost. I think the key selling feature of this that everybody missed in the first one, apart from the font, is actually readable, which is also a step forward. You make things, move vertices, etc. But the key thing that most people missed in the first version is that you have to go, once you want to do your texture, you have to go to another app, right? Okay, you load up Sprite, or there are other pixel editors, of course. And then you have to draw your stuff and then drag it in and drag it out and drag it in and drag it out. Super annoying. So what I'm doing here is, once you have selected your face, you can actually live draw some stuff here. Ooh. I'm not a pixel artist either, apparently. But that's one of the things I want to really make sure people can stay in this program without having to jump in and out. The other things are there. Not very prepared for this. Sorry about that. But simple things like, oh, I can mirror my things. That was kind of impossible to do in PicoCAD 1 because there wasn't just code space to get that going. Other things that a lot of people who, before you kind of start texturing your work in PicoCAD, you often just block it out with colors. And before you had to go to each individual face and say, okay, this color is going to be gray. And this is going to blow your minds, but now you can go to the mesh instead and change the whole color to, oops. And change the color to something else, right? So you don't need to go. So lots of quality of life features like that just to make things easier. What else, if anything? Felt there was something more. It felt richer when I used it last time. Let's load a model. So you can do a bit more funnier things. Let's do it like that. So there's some sort of wipeout looking ship. When you did complex models in PicoCAD 1, it was very hard, right? Because they are all over the place, as it happens in 3D. But here's an actual tool, so you can actually start hiding things from the view. Simple layering, things like that, to work on individual objects, scale, rotate, all the magic things. And then let's do something proper here. Lots of clicks. In the original PicoCAD, when you want to export your GIF, it can just spin, nothing else. You can choose direction if you know the secret key for that. But here you can pick a few different animations. Maybe those could be user-generated, who knows? Time, etc. Outlines are fun. And then it kind of renders a reversing spaceship as you wait, and then it opens the folder and something else. I'm showing all my files. Okay, you get the picture. It made a GIF, hooray. That's kind of where I'm at the moment. I have a few ideas about adding some simple animation tool, not rigging or anything, but kind of get things moving a bit. Would be nice to breathe a bit more life into objects. But otherwise, it's a bit the same, but slightly better. Thanks.
Gracias.